There we go.
All right. Well, Channel 8 is ready, and it is 6 p.m., so let's go ahead and get going here, folks. I'm going to start us off with an announcement here. So this is about the Better Public Meetings Project. The City of Boulder is partnering with the National Civic League on a nationwide effort to make council meetings more engaging and satisfying for everyone who participates. As part of this effort, we want to hear about your experiences with our meetings. So we invite community members who are either in person or online for council meetings, running through our December 7th meeting to rate your experience. We have an online scorecard that takes about 2 minutes to fill out. The link to it is on the screen now. And for the online audience, we're putting a link and a QR code in the chat. You may complete this scorecard once for every time you participate in a council meeting over the next 3 months. And with that, I will go ahead and gavel to a start the Thursday, November 16th, regular and last meeting of the current Boulder City Council, November 16th, 2023. So if we could do a roll call, please, Emily.
Absolutely, and good evening, everyone. We'll start tonight's roll call with Councilmember Benjamin.
Present.
Mayor Brockett.
Present.
Councilmember Folkerts.
Present virtually.
Friend. Here. Joseph.
Right here.
Thank you. Spear.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach.
Here.
Weiner.
Present.
And Yates.
For the last time, here.
Thank you so much. Mayor, we have our quorum.
Thanks very much. So our first item is Small Business Saturday Declaration presented by Mayor Pro Tem Wallach. And if folks who are going to receive this declaration could come up and join him on the dais, please. And Ginny, did you want to say something?
Right here.
Okay.
Good to see you this evening. Okay. Small Business Saturday, November 25, 2023. The City of Boulder is committed to our local small businesses and appreciates the many contributions they make to our local economy and community. According to the United States Small Business Administration, the nation's small businesses provide nearly half of all private sector jobs and create more than 60% of new jobs. Small businesses are particularly important in Boulder, where 90% of businesses have fewer than 20 employees. Boulder recognizes the importance of small businesses in our community that provide essential goods and services, create jobs, and generate local sales taxes, which help fund first responders, human services, arts and culture, parks and recreation facilities, open space, and much more. As we approach Thanksgiving, we join communities and organizations across the nation to celebrate and support small local businesses. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare November 25, 2023, the Saturday after Thanksgiving, as Small Business Saturday, and urge residents of our community to shop and dine locally on that day and throughout the year. Thank you. Would you like to say anything?
On behalf of small businesses in Boulder, and there are many kinds, but especially the folks that will definitely benefit from having all of us go out and shop and vote with our dollars. We just want to say thank you, and to the city for its long-term support. Thanks very much. Sure. That would be helpful. So my name is Sharon King. I'm the executive director of the Boulder Small Business Development Center. And we have Audrey Miller and Irhad Kozik. They are program managers for our Main Street core local programs and for our more advanced science and engineering programs, all kinds of small businesses. Thanks.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Oh, I haven't signed it. Okay, and we have another declaration, which is the International Day of Persons with Disabilities Declaration presented by Councilmember Friend.
Thank you, Mayor Brockett. If I am understanding correctly, there is no one here to receive this declaration? If anyone is here, I will meet you in front of the dais. Otherwise, I'm going to stay seated. Okay, going once, twice. Here we go. International Day of Persons with Disabilities, December 3rd, 2023. In 1990, the federal government passed the Americans with Disabilities Act, or the ADA, which underscores the values of equal access and equal opportunity for people with disabilities and upholds that all people are entitled to a set of fundamental freedoms and protections regardless of ability status. We acknowledge the long history of isolation and discrimination of people with disabilities and applaud the decades of activism and advocacy by the disability community to combat systemic exclusion and injustice. These champions have paved the way for more individuals with disabilities to pursue their full measure of happiness. Despite the ADA, there are enduring challenges for this community that require ongoing support so that they may enjoy the same levels of protections and service as others. They face physical, social, and attitudinal barriers, are more likely to experience co-occurring health challenges and higher healthcare costs, and as a result, many live in poverty and are underemployed or unemployed. The City of Boulder strives to exceed the requirements set forth in the ADA and to create a welcoming and supportive community. This is in line with the importance the community places on being a city that supports those with disabilities as affirmed in the recent Parks and Recreation Master Plan, where 92% of respondents said that serving our community members with disabilities is very important or essential. To that end, the city's Expand program has been providing recreation and leisure activities to promote inclusion, health, and connection since 1980. Expand's mission, creating a community of all abilities through recreation, is strengthened by a strong community of participants, athletes, parents, caregivers, partner agencies, Boulder's Park and Rec staff, and the Boulder community, who continue to support programs and services for people with disabilities. With over 100 programs, three camps, and 2,000 participants in 2023, Expand continues to grow and change to best support the inclusion of people with disabilities. So we, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, declare December 3rd, 2023 as International Day of Persons with Disabilities and urge our city government and community members to commit to the ongoing work of advancing the experience and protection for people with disabilities. Get to know these unique individuals and their lived experiences so that we understand how our systems could better serve them. Share and listen to their stories of joy and community significance. Lead with compassion and empathy so that we create a city for everyone to thrive. Thanks.
Thanks so much for that, Rachel. We're now going to go to open comment, and I believe Ryan Hanshin is going to be sharing with us the public participation guidelines. Ryan, I think you're muted.
Thanks. Ryan Hanshin here, serving the people of Boulder as Community Engagement Manager, and grateful for everyone who's here today to speak and share your perspectives and your experience. We want to share that the city has created, with community members, a vision for productive and meaningful and inclusive civic conversation. This vision supports physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as democracy for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. There's more information about this vision on your screen. And as we move to the next slide, I want to share a few examples of rules of decorum found within the Boulder Revised Code and other guidelines that do support this vision. And we will be sure to uphold these during this meeting. All remarks and testimony shall be limited to matters related to city business. No participant shall make threats or use other forms of intimidation against any person. Obscenity, racial epithets, and other speech and behavior that disrupts or otherwise impedes the ability to conduct the meeting are prohibited. Participants are required to sign up to speak using the name they are commonly known by, and individuals must display their whole name before being allowed to speak online. Currently, only audio testimony is permitted online. And we ask that in-person participants refrain from expressing support or disagreement verbally or with applause. And traditionally, in council chambers, support is shown silently through an American Sign Language, applause, or jazz hands. Thank you, and thank you for being here tonight.
Thank you, Ryan. We've got 8 people signed up to speak in person and 3 online. People will have 2 minutes to speak each, and as I call your names, if you can start moving down towards the front. Our first 3 speakers are Sarah Jane Cohen, Michelle Rodriguez, and Chrissy Smiley. Sarah Jane, it's all yours.
Good evening. My name is Sarah Jane Cohen. I live in Boulder, Colorado. In 2016, Council appointed me to the Boulder-Nobla Sister City Working Group to provide guidance about whether to approve an application from the Boulder-Nobla Sister City project to make the Palestinian city of Nablus a sister city with Boulder and make BNSCP Boulder's representative and liaison in that relationship. After months of work, some of the members of the working group, including me and many other members of the Boulder community and beyond, expressed serious reservations about approving the application. Before Council voted, BNSCP gave Council a statement of commitments, in quotes. A copy of that statement is attached to the remarks that you've been handed for me tonight. BNSCP assured Council that it would be a strictly non-political organization, that it would monitor its website, official communications, and social media to conform to its commitments. It was clear that Council relied on those commitments when it approved the application. However, since even before, and especially since Hamas brutally attacked Israel on October 7th, BNSCP has repeatedly posted and permitted statements on its Facebook page by links on its website and in its official communications to its mailing list, like the following. Quote, "A genocide is now unfolding before our eyes. We are witness to a genocide, an ethnic cleansing." Email to BNSCP mailing list. The municipality of Nablus urgently calls upon the international community to protect the Palestinian people from the threat of genocide. We urge the people of the free world to put an end to the situation fueled by Israel's acts of genocide. These are quotes from the Nablus municipality statement posted on the BNSCP Facebook page. These and other inflammatory political statements fly in the face of the BNSCP commitments, yet it has taken no steps to remove them from its official communications. Since I have 1 second left, Peter Ornstein will continue my remarks. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Sarah Jane. Now, Michelle Rodriguez, Chrissy Smiley, and Brandon James Miller.
Hi, guys. I wanted to congratulate all of y'all that won, and I want y'all to let you know that it was the first time in my life I ever registered and voted. I don't know if that was good, because I want to tell you something else it did. It triggered a jury duty summons. But guys, I know it's really funny, and it was really funny to me too. I was horrified by it, actually, because you guys all know what I've been through. And if anybody knows me, they know that I was found not guilty by reason of self-defense by a 6-person jury here in Boulder in 2019 in my situation and case that led to 2 years and 10 months in federal court of a lawsuit that I had no outcome with. I had a hard time trying to get up there and play God. I did show up for my duty. They said only a medical exemption and or something else, having somebody to take care of besides myself would get me exempt from going in there. And I showed up, and I can't lie, I was very glad he took a last-minute plea deal, whoever it was. But so I didn't have to get up there and play God. And I want you to know it's hard for me to believe that and trust in my own judgment, because I'm trying to become not biased and more trusting. I have been declared disabled, and allegedly it's because I don't trust and or respect authority figures. I am learning to heal every day. I did have conversation with Ms. Dawn. Also, my case was never it was never reviewed by the police and the police thing. I really am reaching to become whole. I would satisfy for half, but I just want you to. And I'm sad. Are you really going to be gone? Wow. That's all.
Thanks, Michelle. Now we have Chrissy Smiley, Brandon James Miller, and Aiden Reed.
Hi, I'm Chrissy Smiley. I've lived in Boulder since 1985, and I run a small business for the last 19 years. I'm here today for various things, but mostly a loophole in the dark sky ordinance. I also just want to say I think we need to be more compassionate about the homeless people in town. It's really upsetting me what's been going on. and a couple other things. So the dark sky ordinance, currently porch fixtures are compliant if the bulb is 900 or fewer lumens and 60 or fewer watts, and they also must be within fixtures that aim light downward and obscure the view of the bulb by material that blocks or diffuses the light. However, the ordinance doesn't even regulate those string lights that everyone's getting at Home Depot, those ones with the Edison bulbs. And they have anywhere from 9 to 24 bulbs on them. None of them are shielded and none of them are diffused. Can you please include string lights as part of the ordinance and change the ordinance? Among other benefits, less light pollution is better for humans and for migrating birds. On another topic, I'd like to ask that the council direct the police to patrol certain locations in town for too loud vehicles. Baseline Road between Foothills and Broadway is horrible. I'm moving from living near there because I can't stand it. And I've tried everything. I've bought noise canceling headphones. It's a nightmare to live anywhere close to Baseline. And people speed, and it's just insane. And I don't think the police are enforcing any of the laws related to any of that. Another thing regarding the police is, you know that they all idle their cars the whole time they're on duty, their whole entire shift. And it just seems unjustifiable. And I've talked to cops about it, and they give me a reason that doesn't make sense. And also the cops that are hired by Whole Foods, which officers do on overtime apparently. I caught a guy idling his Boulder police car the whole time he was keeping Whole Foods from shoplifters. And that's not okay, in my opinion. Yeah, that's it.
Thanks, Chrissy. Now we have Brandon James Miller, and then Aiden Reed and Dennis Tillotman.
Good evening. My name is Brandon James Miller, Chief Executive Officer at Charity Pictures, the Charity Incorporation umbrella, and Charity Law. I have a gift here for the mayor on his newly re-election. Congratulations. Thank you for your time, chamber members, and the household viewers who are on the other side of the lens. Today I want to continue talking about the Universal Libertarian Human Right to Life Project. I have a PowerPoint presentation. Basically, the city ordinance that I'm trying to have ascertained an initiative is relative to an increase in city tax residuals from, you can see, employees getting a 20% increase in a sharing of the profit after cost of goods sold ordinance. May I ask the clerk to go to the next slide, please? You can see that the sales tax and all the taxes that the city makes have a certain percentage. When we get here and we see the consumer spending habits, they spend anywhere between 2 and 3 times more the amount of money when they have an increase like a Christmas bonus check. And they also spend frivolously, and they spend 1/3 of their money on fun. Now this is the key for Boulder. May I have the next slide, please, clerk? This is the money that comes from this 1/3 spending, correlating the taxes that the city collects percentagely. You can see entertainment, all of that with 100,000 citizens in Boulder. $80 increase just from this example of a Christmas bonus, which is the average Colorado Boulder area salary and Christmas bonus annually, by the way. You can see that when it breaks into 1/3, 1/3 is entertainment fun, 1/3 is retirement, and the other 1/3 is debt. I combined 66% for both of those. You can see the residual increase on a monthly basis compounded. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Brandon. And I really apologize, but we can't accept gifts. Those are very generous of you, but I apologize.
Oh, you can. Oh,
yeah.
I didn't know.
Yeah. Thanks for the offer. Love it. Okay. Now we have Aiden Reed, followed by Dennis Tillotman and Joseph Sine.
Good evening, Council. My name is Aiden Reed. My pronouns are he, him. I learned recently that you will be discussing a complaint against Boulder Nablus City Project, which posted a Facebook status from the city of Nablus in which it urged the world to take immediate and decisive action to protect the Palestinian population from the threat of genocide. And I wanted to urge you to realize that while there is a provision in the BNSCP agreement which prohibits it from political speech, as it's a 501c3, no such provision exists for the Israeli sister city of Han Negrev. And it seems to me that this is a double standard. And while I realize that one is a nonprofit, so it's bound by certain rules, and the other, it appears the agreement is not through a nonprofit, I still think this is unfair. If one city can engage in political speech, I think it's acceptable that another city should be able to do so as well, particularly if it's experiencing incursions from the IDF and settlers. Lastly, I hope the council will not take any action to sanction or otherwise distance itself from the Boulder-Nablus Sister City project as a result of this Facebook post. And I hope it will think broadly about how doing so would look as the war in Gaza continues. Thank you.
Thanks, Hayden. Now, Dennis Tiltman, Joseph Sine, and Peter Ornstein. Is Dennis Tiltman present? Not seeing anyone. Then Joseph Sine.
Hi all, good evening. My name is Joseph Stein. I live in zip code 80305. I've lived in Boulder almost my entire life. I am the treasurer of the local chapter of the Democratic Socialists of America. And I'm also here to speak on the Boulder Sister City project. I would also like to note, though it should not matter, that I am Jewish. Ich bin Yiddish, I speak Yiddish. I'm very invested in the Jewish community and Jewish well-being. And I'm here to urge you not to sanction the Boulder-Nablus Sister City project for 3 reasons. The first is that, as my colleague Aidan said, it is unfair to hold one sister city to political neutrality and not another. I think Aidan made this point well. I won't elaborate on it any further. Secondly, and relatedly, though, I'd like to point out that every sister city relationship is an inherently political one. And if you look at where our other sister cities are located, I think this is pretty clear. We have sister cities in Cuba, in Nicaragua, which was experiencing a genocide, I believe, when we made that sister city relationship, in the former USSR, which was part of the USSR, in Dushanbe, when we made that sister city relationship, and in Tibet, which is like Palestine under occupation. Sister cities are inherently political, and it is, I think, unfair to pretend that one sister city should not be political in its speech. And thirdly, and most importantly, a genocide is happening. This has been made clear by numerous genocide scholars, most notably Roz Siegel in the excellent publication Jewish Currents. Now is an excellent time to speak out. The Rabbi Hillel, who is one of the most important progenitors of Jewish thought, said that whosoever destroys a life, it is as though he had destroyed the entire world, and whosoever saves a life, it is as though he had saved the entire world. And Hillel also said, if not now, when? And our colleagues in Nablus are asking for life, and I do not think they should be sanctioned for asking for life. Thank you.
Thanks, Joseph. Our last in-person speaker is Peter Ornstein.
Hello, I'm Peter Ornstein, a longtime resident of Boulder. I am president of Sustainable Israeli-Palestinian Projects, a Boulder-based nonprofit that Sarah Jane and I helped found and which supports projects involving and benefiting Israelis and Palestinians. I'm also a member of the Boulder Ramat HaNegev Sister City Board, but tonight I am only representing myself. I support the concept of a Palestinian sister city, and I've contributed money to the Nablus Sister City to help purchase an ambulance. As Sarah Jane pointed out, the Boulder Nablus Sister City project committed to guard against the use of its platforms for political advocacy and guard against messages that promote anti-Israel or anti-Palestinian perspectives. This is not a free speech issue. This is what they committed to do in order to become an officially recognized sister city. In contrast, these type of statements have never appeared on the Boulder Ramat HaNegev Sister City website or its platforms. A single hateful statement by itself may not be harmful, but many statements repeated by Boulder Nablus' Sister City project and by others add up. They are 1,000 cuts, and they have real-world implications. These inflammatory statements in their aggregate create a hostile and threatening environment in Boulder. When I attend Jewish events, religious or cultural, there is usually an armed guard. How have we devolved where an armed guard is needed at Sabbath gatherings? How have we devolved where bulletproof windows are needed in houses of worship? This is my reality. What I ask is pretty simple. I ask council to ensure that the Boulder Nobles Sister City Project, 1, stop posting and distributing inflammatory messages, including messages generated by others. 2, immediately retract those messages. And 3, abide by the commitments it made to the Boulder community in 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. We now have 3 virtual speakers, and they are Lynn Siegel, Ryan Harwood, and Molly Arndt. So Lynn, you're up.
Yeah, regarding Palestine, I'm supportive. Regarding Israel, I'm supportive. It's because I love Israel, and Israel is suicidal. Israel attacked the USS Liberty in 1967. The United States was attacked by Israel. We will be again. They have gone rogue. I don't support ceasefire. I don't support pause. I support a solution, which is end the occupation now. And of course, no sanctions against Nablus. It's one of the places in the West Bank that's attacked all the time. Okay, let's see. Regarding police, there needs to be some major policing reform in Boulder. My computer bag was taken from the municipal building by an employee, and it was all just a big mistake. And the police got hold of it, and that's the worst thing that could have happened to you. If someone takes a knife to my throat, I will not call the police after this situation. There needs to be major police reform. Now, Nuria knows George Floyd, so let's go with it. The misrepresentation, the misinterpretations were just spellbinding in the investigative report. And this employee is probably psychically, permanently scarred from this situation, mentally. He had a panic attack, and this should never have happened, this whole thing. The police in Boulder are out of line completely. So far as I went out to the JCC today because I like to see both sides of everything. And there was an update on Israel from Mark Holloway. And on the way, I go past what's now called Weathered Vein. It was called Water View or something.
Lynn, your time is up, but thank you for your testimony. Now we have Ryan Harwood and then Molly Arndt.
Hello, Council. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Cool. I'd like to encourage your vocal support for our sister city of Nablus and the occupied West Bank as they endure increasing attacks from Israeli settlers. Last week, Bilal Saleh was killed by Israeli settlers as he, his family, and friends harvested olives as part of a family festival. The settlement where these killers came from is considered illegal by both the U.S. and the UN. Nonetheless, settlements like these have been rapidly and violently encroaching on Palestinian land and stealing people's home in the West Bank for decades. Bilal and his friends and family retreated when the armed settlers approached, but Bilal went back to retrieve his cell phone, which he had left. He was out of sight in the trees when his wife heard him shout, and at least 2 gunshots sounded. His friends and relatives later found him with wounds to the chest and arm. Lacking first aid supplies, they used a ladder as an improvised stretcher to carry him uphill to the nearest road. He died in the presence of his wife and children. His wife, Iklas, said, "My back was broken," when she realized her husband was dead. Attacks like these are common, either by Israeli occupation forces or by settlers, and have escalated since the start of 2023. I've heard nothing from any of you about this, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Members of our sister city are being killed in cold blood to steal their land, and the city of Boulder is silent. You all give a land acknowledgement for the land stolen by settlers that we now call Boulder and that you now control. You should at least pay lip service to an active and ongoing attempt to colonize our sister city of Nablus, so no more land acknowledgements are required. Further, the Nablus Sister City Project should have every right to share statements from the city of Nablus, just as Ramat HaNegev Sister City Project is allowed and utilizes without controversy, especially against, and this is especially true for people combating their own ethnic cleansing. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan. Now we have Molly Arndt as the last speaker.
Thank you to the Boulder City Council members for the opportunity to speak, and particularly to Council Member Benjamin for bringing forward outstanding policy statements on reproductive rights. My name is Molly Arndt. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I'm a Boulder resident, and I am representing the Cobalt Abortion Fund. As an intake coordinator for the fund, I work directly with abortion seekers every day. It is an honor to do this work, and I am grateful to live in a state that has enacted explicit protections for reproductive health care. We have the opportunity and the obligation to do much more. Abortion is expensive, and even more so when you have to travel for it, take time off work, and still take care of your children. We are lucky in Boulder and on the Front Range to have many clinics in our communities, but many folks in the more rural regions of the state do not have this luxury. Cobalt works to remove the financial barriers that our community members face while trying to access reproductive care. We help people pay for food, gas, childcare, hotel rooms, and abortion procedures. Tonight, you have the opportunity to help remove Colorado's largest barrier to reproductive freedom. Cobalt and our coalition of Colorado's reproductive health, rights, and justice advocacy organizations are running a ballot initiative for the 2024 general election to ask Colorado voters to establish abortion as a constitutional right, thus eliminating the discriminatory ban on abortion insurance coverage for state and local public employees and people on government health insurance plans. Public opinion is overwhelmingly on our side. Our coalition's campaign work has shown that Colorado voters want their neighbors on Medicaid and public servants like firefighters, EMTs, teachers, and state, county, and city employees working diligently in our communities to have access to the care that they need. Thank you for your support of these life-saving reproductive health policies.
Thank you, Molly. With that, I'll bring the open comment to a close. I'll turn to staff. Teresa Nuri, did you have any responses?
Sure. I'll limit myself to those that are operational. I know you're going to have a policy discussion on some of this later on, but I want to say, Michelle, I wish you well on your continued journey. Thanks for sharing your experiences. To Chrissy, I'll say that I want to follow up a bit on the idling cars and the dark skies ordinance. And I will say that as somebody who lives near Baseline, I hear it as well. And I know that PD is trying to do different interventions to address, as a lot of this happens frankly, in the wee hours of the evening. And so we will continue and explore what we can do to address some of the racing that we have been seeing and the loud noises in the evening. And I will say, Lynn, and I know that we have talked a lot about the incident. To council members, I'll say I'm happy to speak to you offline about the details, but it was, in fact, we believe, a misunderstanding. We are working with Lynn to make her whole in terms of her property, and I appreciate her desire and her efforts, as well as staff, to make sure that there is some sort of restorative justice in a space that was really a misunderstanding, but we are continuing to move forward and address.
Thanks, Mayor, for the opportunity to give a response. Ms. Rodriguez, I'd just like to thank you for coming to serve your jury duty. The justice system works best when we have all voices represented. Your voice is important, and you bring a really important set of experiences. I understand that that was at great personal cost to you, and I just want to say thank you.
Thanks for that, Teresa. I echo those sentiments. And comments from council. I've got Lauren and then Junie.
I just had one about the string lights. And I think that our code is maybe a little bit confusing because I believe they're referred to as catenary lights, but that we do have code sections around illumination on those. Just if that was helpful. I know there was a comment about that.
Thanks, Lauren. Junie?
Yes, thank you. I do have questions about the sister city, and most of them are process questions. And I think it's relevant to the open comment that just happened. And I'm seeing myself double, by the way.
Oh, I think it's all right.
Well, yes.
Junie, what I might say is we do have an agenda item for that tonight, so we might push our questions and discussion on that to the agenda item, or is there something that you feel like we have to address right this moment?
Well, that's a complex question, right? Because for me, that question came about based on some of the comments that was made by Mr. Reed during his comments. So that's why I wanted some clarification.
If you feel it's important, go ahead. Yep.
Yeah. I think my question was whether all sister cities are created through a nonprofit. I know last year, and someone asked me whether Haiti, for instance, wanted to create a sister city, and I was looking into that process. And my understanding, it has to be done through a nonprofit, so maybe I understand that incorrectly. So I wanted maybe some clarification from staff, Nuria, or from our city attorney.
I will say, Councilmember Joseph, that I do not know offhand, not having been in this city when all the sister cities were approved, but we can certainly get back to you unless other folks know any of the responses to that.
I mean, I will say my understanding is it does require a nonprofit to create the sister city relationship. Yeah.
I know that the Israeli sister city is also a nonprofit. They both are.
Yeah, that was my impression as well. And I have more comments and questions. I'll save them for later. So thank you for that.
Okay. Thanks, Junie. Anything else on open comment? Seeing none, thanks everyone for your testimony. We appreciate you weighing in. And Emily, can we go to our consent agenda, please?
Of course. Next, we have our consent agenda, and we have on that agenda items A through F.
Questions or comments on the consent agenda? Rachel.
Just that I'll be recusing from F again on the design and construction standards.
Well, I'll call on myself. So, Mark, you sent out a hotline regarding the policy statement, and Carl Castillo responded this afternoon with a couple of proposed changes following up on that. Did you want to propose those changes for inclusion?
Well, I'm not going to read them, but I think he answered my requests perfectly, and I would be very supportive of the language that he has proposed on those matters. Yes, I would offer a motion to amend the statement in accordance with the language that has been produced by Carl Castillo on those items I raised in my hotline.
Do you mind moving the entire consent agenda with that amendment to item B?
Okay, I will amend the entire consent agenda with that item B.
Or move the entire consent agenda?
Yes, I will move the entire consent agenda then.
Very good. Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Emily, can we do a roll call here?
Yes. Yes. We'll start the roll call on tonight's consent agenda with Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Councilmember Folkerts?
Yes.
Friend?
I'm going to recuse from F, but otherwise, yes. F is in Frank if you need that.
Great, thank you so much. Joseph?
Yes.
Councilmember Spear?
Yes.
Wallach?
Yes, but with respect to Article 22 of the 2024 policy statement on regional, state, and federal issues, I will decline to approve. But only on that.
So actually, I'm not sure that you can vote against one policy, Mark. I think you could register an objection to it, but you probably have to vote yes or no on the whole thing.
Then I will vote yes and register an objection to Article 22, as I have previously. I do think that is a misguided policy.
Fair enough. Did I get that right, Teresa? Okay,
All right. Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
And Councilmember Benjamin.
Yes.
The consent agenda with now including the amendment to 3B and the noted recusal from Councilmember Friend on 3F is hereby approved unanimously with a vote of 9-0.
Thanks so much. Can we go to our call-up check-ins, please?
Absolutely. Next, we have our call-up check-in item 4A on tonight's agenda, and that is the consideration of a landmark alteration certificate application to construct a new 804 square foot accessory building and modify existing non-historic garage at 703 11th Street, an individual landmark pursuant to section 9-11-18 of the Boulder Revised Code.
Any questions, comments, or interest in calling this up? Seeing none, can we go to the next one, please?
Next, we have item 4B, and that is for the consideration of a use review for a non-residential uses at 3825 Iris Avenue within the residential high 4 zoning district. This site is within the Iris Office Plan Unit development.
Any questions, comments, or interest in calling this one up? Not seeing any, then I think that finishes our call check-ins. So if we can go to our public hearing, please.
Absolutely. Next, we have item 5. That is our public hearing. We have item 5A. That is our only public hearing for this evening, and that is a second reading and consideration of a motion to approve 8590, amending Title IX Land Use Code, BRC 1981, to update the use table and use standards related to walkable neighborhood centers, including changes to the standards for restaurants, brew pubs, and taverns within the BMS Business Main Street District and University Hill General Improvement District. Or second reading and consideration of a motion to approve ordinance 8605, amending Title IX Land Use Code to update the use table and use standards related to walkable neighborhood centers and setting forth related details.
All right, this is a mouthful. Thanks, Emily.
I didn't even have to step in and buy some time for people to get settled. So with that, perhaps I'll go straight to our Director of Planning and Development Services, Brad Mueller.
Thank you, Nuria. Yes, Brad Mueller, Director of Planning and Development Services. Just wanted to preface this item and say that we are very excited to bring this forward for a number of reasons. It represents a long-standing work item that goes, depending on the context you'd like to accept, several years back. It does also represent the last major work plan item of council priorities for this last 2 years that you had set for our department, so we're excited to be able to bring this to conclusion for you this evening. Fundamentally, this is a proposal based on the study sessions and feedback we've gotten from you in the last several months that addresses a general theme you've provided for us of simplification and providing grace and awareness of the needs of the business community, particularly restaurants. This is designed to simplify things for restaurants and other commercial interests, as well as provide for walkability, which of course is another of the city's long-standing values as well. So with that, I'm turning it over to Lisa Hood, who will take us on through.
Thank you, Brad. Good evening, council members. I am also excited to bring forward this ordinance, the final part of our use table and standards project, before you tonight. You might have noticed through that very long intro that it's a bit of a unique one, as we have 2 ordinances for your choice tonight, essentially. And I will walk through the differences between them, but I wanted to start from the outset explaining that the 2 ordinances are identical except for their approach to how they treat the restaurant standards on the Hill. So 8590, it would modify the standards that we currently have for restaurants on the Hill. 8605 would not modify those standards. Otherwise, they are exactly identical. They both update the use allowances and standards to support walkable neighborhood centers. And you can see on the slide, there's a number of business types and even residential types that we've looked at through this ordinance. So it would impact a number of business types throughout the city. This presentation might look a little familiar because we were here at a study session in July, so there's going to be a little bit of repetition, but just to refresh your mind and for people who might not have seen it before, I will go through a background of the project, like Brad said, multi-year project, and then I'll go into the scope, background, and public input for this specific module, and then I will summarize the ordinance changes and the differences between the two ordinances. So going back for our background, the initial goals of the Use Table and Standards project were really to simplify and streamline what was a really complex part of our land use code and make it more understandable and legible. The Use Table and Standards is what lays out where businesses can be allowed throughout the city and what types of residences can be allowed where. The changes are intended to create more predictability and certainty. And really, the goal that aligns with this module is trying to get the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan policies and guidance to match up better with the regulations in the code. So trying to understand what businesses and residences people want to see and align that with where we're actually allowing those throughout the city. Like Brad said, the Use Table and Standards project has been going on for a while. So it was actually started in 2018. We've completed phase 1 in 2019, and we've been working through these 3 modules of phase 2 since 2022. You'll remember that you've seen several ordinances over the last 2 years related to this. Module 1 was functional fixes. Those were the technical updates that really reorganized that section of the code, made it a lot easier to read, but didn't really make substantive changes at that time. We started the substantive changes in Module 2, and that was the focus on the diversity of uses in the industrial areas. So that was really focused on the industrial districts and industrial uses in the city. That was adopted back in February. And now we're on Module 3, the final part related to neighborhoods and neighborhood centers, where we can also look at the mix of uses that we're allowing there. And the focus has really been for Module 3, the walkable neighborhood centers. You can see on this map that we have 12 neighborhood centers that are identified in the comprehensive plan. And if you draw a 15-minute walk shed from all of those neighborhood centers, you can see that it really covers a majority of the city of Boulder. So it's really looking at what types of uses and businesses should we allow in those neighborhood centers so that the people that live within a 15-minute walk are able to access those services that they need on a daily basis. And through all the public input, which I'll go through on some later slides, some focus areas that came up as kind of the main topics for this module were restaurants, duplexes and townhomes, and then some other miscellaneous changes to businesses that would help support walkable neighborhoods. And you'll remember that we talked through those at the study session in July. A little further on walkable neighborhoods and why we're focusing on that, we want to remove the barriers that are in the code for the uses that people want to have nearby, that maybe the code is standing in the way of those uses or businesses opening up. And it's really intended to support the 15-minute neighborhood idea so that people can access those daily services by walking, biking, or transit within 15 minutes of where they live or work. And going back to the initial goal of this project, it's really trying to align the use table with those adopted comprehensive plan policies. So this is really an implementation of those comprehensive plan guidance. And also just building on the previous input that we've received over the many years of this project. This is the map from the Boulder Valley Comprehensive Plan that identifies the many different neighborhood centers that we have throughout the city. You can tell there's many different characters and types of neighborhood centers throughout the city, and that's really where the focus is on this ordinance, or both of these ordinances tonight. And it's kind of the translation of this planning guidance and how we apply that through zoning, where we get to the focus on the changes in these zoning districts. So these are the zoning districts where the neighborhood centers exist. So the ordinances focus on changes in the business zones, which start with B, downtown zones, and mixed-use zones. There's a number of different goals and policies in the comprehensive plan that this ordinance helps support and implement, but I wanted to highlight 2 main policies. So the first being our neighborhood centers, that's 2.19. And that really says that the neighborhood centers should be where people gather and get their services and are able to meet, that they should meet the everyday needs of their neighboring communities. It also gives guidance in the comprehensive plan about ensuring that transition from the more intensive areas within the neighborhood centers to the less intensive single-family areas outside of them. Another important project goal or policy is 2.24, and that's the commitment to a walkable and accessible city. That's where we talk about the 15-minute neighborhood idea and making sure that the city is promoting the development of a walkable and accessible city by providing safe and easy access to places like these neighborhood centers. So with those two policies, that's where we're really trying to implement those changes through the land use code. I have some summaries of all of the public input that we've heard throughout the course of this project. I won't go through this in detail because we did go through that in the study session, but I just wanted to kind of go through a brief overview. We started engagement back in 2019, so we'd had in-person engagement in 2019, virtual engagement in 2020, where we specifically asked people what they would like to see in their neighborhood centers. And all of this has really been building to the work and the two ordinances that are before you tonight. What we heard in that initial round of input was that people wanted to see more mixed uses, more housing, more neighborhood stores, walkable places, restaurants, things like that. Less of the more vehicle-oriented things like parking, traffic, car dealerships, gas stations, things like that. And we asked people if they were open to seeing a greater mix of uses in their neighborhood centers, and we heard a lot of broad support for restaurants and coffee shops, which are both classified as restaurants in our land use code, retail uses, and personal services. We drilled down to more specific engagement this summer. So those had been kind of broad questions about what types of uses would you want to see. And with our engagement this summer, we presented what these changes could actually be. We went through over several years with our planning board subcommittee. We went through what potential changes could eliminate those barriers that we were seeing in the code, between the code and the plan. And so to do that, in our engagement, we built the story map, which I went over in the study session, and a questionnaire. We also did in-person promotion. We popped up at several of the neighborhood centers and just chatted with people about what they would like to see. We were at fairs and events in the summer. And we also sent mailings to all of the neighborhood center business and property owners so that they were aware that this engagement opportunity existed and they could share their input about what they'd like to see in the neighborhood center. The story map and questionnaire was open for about three weeks. In July, we got about 250 responses. Hopefully you were able to check it out. It was a really great engagement tool where people could look at all of the different neighborhood centers, see what zoning's there, what businesses are there, what use types are there, and what the potential changes could be. And many of those potential changes are reflected in both of the ordinances tonight. We also had the questionnaire asking people what their concerns were or what businesses they were supportive of. And what we heard was a lot of support for seeing more restaurants, grocery stores, small retail shops, other things that would also be classified as restaurants like coffee shops and ice cream shops, post offices. Really an emphasis on supporting local businesses was something we heard a lot about. More concerns about, kind of similar to the earlier engagement efforts, concerns about auto-oriented uses like gas stations and drive-thrus, and also just kind of non-local stores, so big box stores, things like that. In addition to the general public input that we got, I mentioned we had a planning board subcommittee that guided the work in the initial years of the project. But we also had a public working group, which was a group of about 20 stakeholders and interested residents who met throughout the last couple of years to guide Module 2 and Module 3. So we met with them 3 times this year to talk about the Module 3 changes. They helped with the public engagement. We've also been working with 2 members of the planning board who have provided guidance, and we met with the community connectors back in July, and we talked about that at the study session. So that's kind of a summary of the public input for this project. Now I'll get into the summary of the changes that are reflected in both of the ordinances. So I'm going to focus probably the most on restaurants, but there are changes to other businesses as well. But because restaurants has been kind of the most common topic of conversation related to this ordinance, I'm going to focus on that. So starting with some background on restaurants. Restaurants from the outset of the use table project before even Module 1 were one of the most complex parts of the use table. Before we reorganized it, there were 8 different lines in the use table for different types of restaurants and restaurant rules. We reorganized that. It looks a lot better after Module 1, but there's still, because we didn't make substantive changes, there's still a really complex patchwork of different restaurant requirements in our code. So there's a lot of opportunity to streamline and simplify that in the code right now. Generally, all these different flavors of restaurant requirements are usually around what the size of the restaurant can be, the size of the patio can be, and what their hours of operation can be. I will highlight the specific standards for the University Hill General Improvement District, since that was a common topic in the public comment that we got. So the University Hill General Improvement District is located in the BMS zoning district. That's the Business Main Street zoning district. And in that area, a conditional use approval is required. A good neighbor meeting and management plan is required. Restaurants can only be under 4,000 square feet, and they must close before 11 unless they don't have a liquor license. They also have some standards related to the percentage of income that has to be from food, and some other standards related to having a food prep area, and if they're a brew pub or tavern, they have to provide snacks. So some of those are unique requirements that we don't have in other places other than the kind of overall size, patio, hours of operation types of things. And the proposal in the ordinance, or the ordinances before you tonight, kind of differ in how the approach is taken for different types of zoning districts. And the first option, or the first set of regulations, is related to interface areas. And so those are the areas of the city where you can see on the map, it's our BT zones, our mixed use zones, our BMS district, and our DT 1, 2, and 3 districts. And those are really where the residential and commercial areas interface the most. And so it's kind of those transition areas between residential and commercial. And in those areas, we did want to retain kind of more protective standards to ensure that there's more protection for those residents that are in close proximity to any potential impacts that would happen from those restaurants. So the proposal here is to, but the intent is also to streamline the approval process for restaurants. So right now, in most districts in the city, if a restaurant is larger than 1,500 square feet, they get kicked into a use review, which is a discretionary review process. And so the intent with these changes is to open up that approval by right process to more of those restaurants. And so in both of the ordinances in the interface area, the standards would allow by right restaurants up to 4,000 square feet as long as they close by 11. And so that hours of operation we thought was important to retain, because the way our use table works, we group restaurants, brew pubs, and taverns into the same use type. And so there's not a difference between restaurants and bars in our use table. So the hours of operation, we think, works as an important delineation between what a restaurant is and what a bar is. And so in those interface zones, we thought that it was important to keep that 11 p.m. close. But there is an option in both of the ordinances to, if a restaurant wants to be open later or be larger than 4,000 square feet, they can pursue a use review. So that, like I said, is the discretionary review process. It's reviewed by staff first, planning board can call it up, but giving that option. And then this is where the two ordinances split, because for these interface zones, and you can see kind of the 8590 and 8605 on this slide, this is where they differ for the University Hill area. So in 8590, it groups the University Hill area into all the other similar interface zoning districts. So those standards would apply as well. And that would eliminate those unique standards that I mentioned on the last slide. 8605 does not make any changes to those current University Hill standards. And then one other thing I wanted to note, right now we have the patio size I mentioned often plays into what type of review process restaurants have to go through. And as we looked into previous approvals and what standards are applied, there's a lot of really similar standards. And so we came to the conclusion that rather than requiring a different approval process, we could just come up with a set of general standards for when a patio is near a residential area. Here's the noise, trash, and things like that kind of standards that they should comply with, but it doesn't kick them into a different type of approval process. So we kind of end up at the same result without having to modify the review process. So that's kind of the bulk of this is the most complicated slide. So getting past that, regarding restaurants as well, in our more intensive commercial zoning districts right now, many restaurants are allowed by right. However, if they have a patio and they're close to residential, that will kick them into a use review. And so the proposal in both of the ordinances tonight is to remove that use review requirement and instead rely on those general outdoor seating standards, essentially. So then all restaurants in these intensive commercial zones where you kind of expect that type of activity would be allowed by right. Finally, the only other place in the city where restaurants are allowed are in a couple of our high-density residential zoning districts, our RH3 and RH7 districts. And the proposal in both of the ordinances is to increase the maximum size of allowed by right restaurants from 1,000 square feet to 2,000 square feet. Otherwise, they're prohibited, and that's not proposed to change. But similarly, the outdoor seating standards would apply. Just going back to the public input, what we've heard on restaurants, as I've mentioned, is a lot of support. So during our summer, our engagement this summer, we heard a lot of support for more restaurants in neighborhood centers. We asked specifically if people were open to streamlining that approval process for restaurants and got a lot of support there, and just heard a lot of people wanting to see more outdoor seating throughout the city. Obviously, that was something that became really important during the last few years. So we heard a lot about that. Our public working group was also supportive. There were some split opinions where some people saw a few of the members of the working group saw the benefit in having consistency in those interface zoning districts and how they're treated throughout the city. And then some members of our working group thought that perhaps there needed to be some more input on the specific changes to the Hill. Our planning board liaisons were supportive of the changes when we talked to them a few months ago, and then also the community connectors were supportive of more restaurants throughout the community and just supporting local businesses and small businesses. I'll just talk briefly. We talked about the duplexes and townhomes in the study session, and the initial proposal that we brought to you at study session was to make it easier for duplexes and townhomes to be allowed in both the BR and BT zones. After our discussion at study session, the ordinance just reflects changes in the BT, business transitional zones. So it removes a barrier for duplexes and townhomes in those transitional zones only. And then again, what we've heard related to that was broad support for additional housing types and kind of that transition of intensity in the neighborhood centers. Finally, this is the kind of miscellaneous but also very important changes, the proposed use allowances or standards changes. So I mentioned that our planning board subcommittee in 2019 and 2020, I think, met 20 times, going through every line of the use table, every column of the use table, trying to identify where we could eliminate barriers. So this really reflects their work and also the work that we heard, or just all of the input that we heard in those initial years of this project, of places where we could open things up to make sure that the businesses that people want to see are near where they live. So there's a number of these changes that we went through in the study session, which would be easier to get an easier approval process throughout the city. And we heard broad support for all of these changes throughout all of our input as well. This is one of my last slides, but just kind of to go back to the fact that there's two ordinances, I wanted to explain kind of the rationale for that. So we brought, we came to you for a study session on July 27th with a very similar presentation to this. And what we heard from council at that time was support for streamlining the standards and review process for restaurants, as well as encouragement for staff to streamline the regulations on the Hill, similarly to the proposal for downtown. And so that's what led to Ordinance 8590, and that's the ordinance that we took to Planning Board. And we took it to Planning Board on August 15th. We had a public hearing with 8 speakers. Many of them were in support of the changes, but a few were concerned about the changes on the Hill. And Planning Board ultimately recommended approval of Ordinance 8590, but not with any changes to the University Hill General Improvement District. So that's where Ordinance 8605 came from, is essentially a reflection of the Planning Board recommendation, which makes all of the same changes, but does not make any changes to the Hill. And they recommended having a separate process.
I did want to, at this point, in addition to speaking about board and council feedback, give a little bit of context to the council about interdepartmental coordination on this as well. It can be easy to look at these activity centers and imagine them as only a land use effort, but it really does represent the work also of transportation, community vitality, parks and recreation adjacent, and also police and fire. And we know that those are important considerations, and I want to give the board the context of the ongoing discussion we have with those different departments when these types of land use changes are being contemplated and put into effect. On the Hill in particular, we know that there are the potential for public safety impacts, as there are anytime there's more intensification. We've been in contact with police, and we recognize, given the history and some of the special initiatives that are ongoing for code compliance, code enforcement, coordination with UNC, the fraternity, IFC on the Hill, the neighborhood association on the Hill, all of those different component parts, that would be in particular an area where we would really want to monitor and adjust based on any policy changes, which is really part of a bigger framework, as I say, of what is not just one departmental impact for any of these policy changes, but an ongoing one. So I do want to acknowledge that issue that's been raised in our internal discussions and daylight that, and also point to the fact that each of these individual land use decisions are brought forward as individual use review with their own possibility for conditions and such. But again, just putting it in the context of other conversations that we've had regarding larger code enforcement and code compliance and coordination with that community and all the activity centers. So just wanted to add that before our final slide.
Thanks, Brad. The final slide is just the suggested motion of either or ordinance, essentially. So either Ordinance 8590 or Ordinance 8605. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Great, thanks. That was exceptionally clear. Appreciate that presentation. Questions for staff? Mark?
I don't want to ask you really to try to represent Planning Board, but can you speak to why their recommendation was unanimous for one ordinance over the other? And because that's not the normal recommendation we receive from Planning Board.
Yeah, I can try to do that, Brad, if anybody else's memory is better than mine. But I think the discussion really focused on, whether the public input had been sufficient, because it had been general to the city, like citywide, about restaurants and not specific to those unique standards that are in the Hill, such as the 50% requirement of income from food and things like that. And so I think that they were just concerned that because the input had been broad and citywide, it hadn't been quite targeted enough on those specific line items that apply to the Hill. And so they thought that there should be a separate process that focused on that.
And how would you all want to respond to that?
Yeah, just to add to that, I think Lisa's characterization is right. I think the timing and recognition of evolution of the broader community input on this kind of plays into that. So at the time that it was going to Planning Board, some of the discussions, which I will say really took place as part of these broader conversations that I characterized just a moment ago, caused folks from the University Hill community to be more specific in their comments at that hearing. I would say much of that input subsequently has been ripened, if you will, and people have had additional discussions about that. So I don't want to speak for Planning Board, as Lisa indicated, but I don't know that they would be in the same space today, recognizing that those discussions continued on. But again, I can't speak for them at this point.
Okay. With respect to the decrease in distance from 500 feet to 300 feet, in terms of outdoor space adjacent to residential, what was the basis for the 300 feet? I mean, was it arbitrary? Was there a thought process behind it? Any data behind it?
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to point that out. So the 300 foot is a typical block width from east to west.
Okay.
So that's what we thought that would be kind of where the impacts might end, and the 500 foot in the spirit of trying to streamline approval processes, the 500 foot really catches a lot of people or a lot of restaurants into the higher approval process of use review. And so the 300 foot would allow for more streamlining and more restaurants to have a more streamlined process.
Okay. And 8605 requires good neighbor meetings and management plans when a use review is conducted. Does 8605 have that in it if you're going for later than 11 o'clock hours or larger space?
Yes, so exactly. That standard is in both ordinances. So if a restaurant were to pursue a use review in those interface zoning districts, they would still have to do the good neighbor meeting and management plan in either ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, did you solicit the viewpoint of the university with respect to the restaurant changes on the Hill?
Not specifically, but we were at the Hill Merchant Business Association meeting. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Just a few weeks ago, and there were representatives from CU there. So in kind of broader discussions, we did speak with them.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, let's go to our public hearing. We've got 6 people signed up to speak, 2 in person, 4 virtually. Each of you will have 3 minutes to speak. Our 2 in-person speakers are Ted Rockwell and Mark Heinritz. Ted?
Good evening. It's great to see you all. First-time caller, long-time fan. My name's Ted Rockwell. I'm a 25-year resident of the city of Boulder, a homeowner, a university employee, a parent, and I'm a commissioner on the UCAMC Commission. But I'm speaking to you tonight as a resident of Boulder and someone who's worked on the Hill for the last 18 years. I've seen firsthand the changes that have occurred since 2006 in that commercial area district, and I'm speaking in support of Ordinance 8590. The Hill Hotel project will be complete in March of '24, and the CU Conference Center will be ready in the year after that. These 2 hospitality projects will attract a variety of visitors to our town and to the Hill. They're going to include scientists and parents of CU students and tourists. These new visitors will represent a unique opportunity to change the boom or bust cycle Hill businesses currently suffer because of an over-reliance on student foot traffic. In order to give businesses a chance to attract those hotel visitors to the Hill, we need to ensure the regulatory environment is consistent with the rest of the city. The reality is, increased barriers to opening businesses cost new businesses time and money. Onerous and complicated regulatory conditions favor chains and large corporate interests. By making regulations consistent, we move the needle towards giving local and smaller businesses a shot at helping the Hill become a vibrant center of the Boulder commercial community. I thank you for your time today and for your service to Boulder.
Thanks, Ted. Mark Heinritz.
Good evening. I'm Mark Heinritz. I've been an owner of the Sink since 1992, and we've owned our property since 2000, so sort of on both sides of the equation on the merchant property owner role. And I'm here to support 8590. So 8590 does not restore the Hill Business District to its pre-2013 status. It does not allow 2 a.m. liquor licenses by right. It does not allow operating hours past 11 p.m. by right, which did exist in 2012, for instance. What it does accomplish is it allows potential businesses to consider the district in the same zoning terms as any other district in Boulder. This is a move towards a healthy business district. According to Brad Siegel of Puma, this is the most studied district in Colorado. Brad has been paid well to do 11 studies of the Hill. He actually said there is nothing more to say. He will not do another study of the Hill. It's over, right? So in regards to studying the subject more, as a practical matter, more study about this issue kicks the can of a council decision to 2026. So this means that trying to attract a new business under these changes would not take effect until 2027. So the time is now to set the Hill up for success, to allow the Hill to meet a new future, to build upon all the years of work of getting new anchor tenants for the Hill. The time is now, not in 3 or 4 years. The current measures do not work. They succeed in repelling the very businesses that the ordinance sought to attract. They are a failure. To date, the conversation around the Hill has been a detraction to Boulder's appeal. Let's make conversation about the Hill a contributor to Boulder's appeal. I ask you to vote in favor of 8590, which will put the Hill zoning on an equal footing with all the other similar neighborhood centers in the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Mark, do you mind, Mayor Brockett, may I ask a question?
Of course.
You emailed us, I think earlier today or yesterday, about some history on the Hill. Did I have that right?
Yeah.
And one of the things that I think you talked about was the history of Hill riots and whether they happened residential versus commercial, sort of where their origins were. Can you just confirm that I understood that correctly, that your understanding of the history is that the riots that have happened on the Hill emanated from residential spots?
Yeah, my recollection is there was, and it's a contentious point,
Yeah,
of
I
course.
didn't know.
There was one riot that happened when I think it was Chief Kobe at the time, thought the best way to disperse all the closing time patrons coming out was to line up police and riot gear across the street. And so that one was provoked on the Hill. The rest, I think there's 6 others throughout a 5-year period there that happened in the neighborhoods and passed through the Hill district.
Thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah, thanks.
Very good. We'll go to our virtual speakers. The first 3 are Jake Hudson Humphrey, Lynn Siegel, and Jonathan Singer.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
All right, good evening. I want to start off by saying thank you to Lisa and everyone who's worked super hard on this, on all this land use review. It's obviously been a lot of work, and we really appreciate all the hard work you've done. So my name's Jake Hudson Humphrey. I'm been in Boulder for about 5 years now. I'm speaking on behalf of the University Hill Merchants Association. I emailed a letter to the city councilors a couple days ago. I'm going to read what I can of that in my 2 minutes here. So, we are the University Hill Merchants Association, representing 70 plus businesses in the University Hill General Improvement District. We are writing this letter urging you to vote to adopt Ordinance 8590 as originally recommended by city staff. Ordinance 8590 would simplify the process of opening a business on the Hill and remove the burden of excessive use review processes from small business owners. This would make it much easier and more attractive to open a business on the Hill and will help reduce vacancy rates. When longtime Hill business Albums on the Hill closed last year, Illegal Pete's wanted to expand into the vacant space, but chose not to due to the additional liquor regulations. The space remains vacant. Similar stories exist for many vacant businesses on the Hill. Ordinance 8590 would give Hill businesses with liquor licenses the ability to apply for a use review to stay open past 11. Many businesses will continue to close by 11, but having the option to stay open past 11 allows us the flexibility to accommodate changing consumer preferences and stability in a very challenging business neighborhood. This option should be available to all businesses. Ordinance 8590 would remove the 50% of income from food sales requirement. Hill restaurants with liquor licenses approved after the new ordinance will only need 25% of their sales to come from food, like the rest of Boulder. This will make it easier for a restaurant to sell a customer an expensive bottle of wine at dinner without worrying that they might not meet their 50% requirement, for example. The strict land use standards that currently exist for the Hill Commercial District do not apply anywhere else in the city. We're not asking you to show special treatment to the Hill District. We're asking you to level the playing field and apply the same land use standards to all neighborhood centers zoned DT1, DT2, DT3, and BMS. The Hill District has been unfairly overregulated for over a decade, and the district struggles as a result. Remove these extra layers of regulation and give the Hill a fighting chance. Sincerely, the University Hill Merchants Association. And this letter is signed by Tell Jones, The Sink, Mark Heinritz, The Sink, Bonnie Dahl, The Fitter, Dakota Seufer, Cafe Ion, Jason Hebb, property owner, Peter Hauser, The Corner, Ashley Bott, The Waffle Lab, Bradley Rumaya, The Waffle Lab, Rachel Rumaya, The Waffle Lab, Fred Campos. That's all my time, but there's a few more signatures. All right, thank you all.
Thanks, Jake. And we have Lynn Siegel, Jonathan Singer, and Pete Turner.
I support grape juice over wine. I don't think that boozing up improves society. I think it detracts from society. I don't think people need booze. I think they escape to booze, and their escape costs me a lot of money. It's not cheap to clean up about people that have dumbed themselves down. That's what I think booze is, dumbing yourself down. Why do people do it? I have no idea. I have a Midori sour every 10 years. So I guess I'm saying I want 8605. I'm presuming the planning board went for 8590. And mostly what I want to say about this growth and expansion issue, because what you decide here depends on, how you're going to promote business and what you think business needs and how business doesn't pay for the costs of having people boozing up and dumbing down. And what I support overall is a much better Boulder Valley comp plan that the use tables are set up underneath, that has a population plan in effect that balances jobs, housing, and promotes healthy growth. I'm happy that HH failed. I voted against it, even though I'm a senior. I don't like being tricked into, getting one thing, the Tabor stuff in exchange for property tax. And I also really don't understand, and I really think there need to be some workshops for people. Either that or I'm just too stupid and you can forget about me because my voice doesn't matter. And that's fine too. But I feel like when I'm paying more property taxes and my value is going up sky high, $3,000 a year, I don't see why the schools need that extra elevated value of my house transferred to them, other than the fact that it's promoting growth overall and there's going to be more kids in the school. And I don't support that. I support a managed population. I'm just an old Al Bartlett type, but you younger folks probably don't even know who the guy is, but population needs to pay its way. Impact needs to pay its way, and it doesn't.
Thank you, Lynn. Now I have Jonathan Singer and then Pete Turner.
Good evening. I'm Jonathan Singer. I'm the Senior Director of Policy Programs with the Boulder Chamber, and I'm here today to support 8590. You've already heard really compelling testimony from both Ted and Mark, and I'm not sure I can top it, but I do want to start by thanking Lisa, Brad, and the entire staff for the work that they've put in. But also, I want you to all take a look at the letters that you've received from the Boulder chapter of the Colorado Restaurant Association, as well as the Downtown Boulder Partnership. And the reason that I want you to focus on those letters, in addition to hearing support from the Boulder Chamber today, is because 8590 represents the beginning of parity, of leveling the playing field for businesses. We hear from businesses outside of the Hill area today that they would like to see their competitors geographically with a similar road to move forward. So last thing that I'll mention here is, there is a time and a place for a conversation on what is and isn't appropriate. The conditional use review does that. What doesn't do that is continued study. Mark and I were talking about this a little while ago, and if you were able to, Mr. Heinrichs and I were talking about this a little while ago, if you were to look at the amount of time that we have taken to study this issue, the studies themselves would now not only be old enough to vote, but they would probably be renting cars and having kids. It's been decades, and it's time to move forward. So in the spirit of moving forward, I'm going to send back the remainder of my time and encourage you all to support 8590. Thank you.
Thanks, Jonathan. Our last speaker is Pete Turner.
Hello, can you all hear me?
Yes.
Council, thanks for allowing me to speak tonight. And I'm here to speak in my support of 8590 as well. My business, I started a year and a half, 2 years out of CU, graduated in 1993, opened in August 1995, so I'm 28 years old. And I've started my business before any of this regulation, and have kind of lived and grown my business to, we took additional space in our original location, then moved around the corner to our current location. And we, as the Hill Merchants Association said, it was less, they said it was, we did consider taking over the album space, and it was less about the liquor license restriction. It was more about the size restriction, right? We had the opportunity in the liquor license that we own at our current location across from the Fox Theater to open till 2:30 a.m. We actually don't choose to do that at this point. We haven't done that since COVID, and that's a business decision. So, but really, we would love to expand our business to give us more space for our patrons. We just, it's really difficult to do business with the amount of business that we've done. In 28 years, we've grown to 12 locations, and 10 in Colorado, 2 in Arizona, and we've grown our footprint to, anywhere from, we've got locations that are over 4,000 square feet. And I guess I just want to say, all along, a couple things. The current restrictions have always seemed arbitrary, unjust, and unfair to me. They don't seem supported by actual study. I also want to say, I had heard sort of the recommendation that if, these changes were done to all the other areas of the city in Proposal 8590, that, it was brought up that maybe we should do a separate study or, for the Hill itself. I just questioned when these restrictions were put in place. I think it was only about the Hill, and the entire city wasn't taken into account. So that seems unfair, first of all. I also have always felt that, University Hill, which, again, a lot of students live up there, obviously a lot of residents, but it is, the sort of foot of CU Boulder. 40,000 students. I mean, it's really a big part of the character of the city. So I think to not allow it to play with the same rules as the rest of the city just seems really misguided. And I've always just questioned that. So again, I've seen the character of the Hill and business on the Hill change in the 28 years I've been doing business, and I know this would help to improve and invigorate it.
Thanks very much, Pete.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, I will close the public hearing. Thanks everyone for your testimony, and bring it back to City Council for discussion. Bob?
Kick us off maybe. First of all, I want to compliment staff, particularly Carl Geyer. It only took 5 years to get the use tables into shape, and so congratulations on that, Carl. You're probably about ready to retire now, right?
Oh, yeah. No.
No. Don't take the bait. Well, and I'm really impressed. I have to say that when I sat through the retreat in January of 2 years ago, and we stuffed so much stuff at you, and I thought there's no way these guys are going to be able to complete this, and you did. Wow. The last item on the last day of this council, so congratulations to all of you for all the hard work over the last 2 years and for accomplishing everything we threw at you. I suspect the next council will just want to throw more work at you, so you better staff up, Brad. I also was taken by Mark's comment about the consultant Brad Siegel with Puma. I've known Brad for many, many years, and I've never seen Brad Siegel turned down a consulting gig. And when Brad Siegel says, this has been studied so much, even I won't study it anymore, you know that really means something. I think the Hill has been overstudied, as Pete also mentioned. I think the speakers spoke to the right point, which is we need to get parity. We need to get equity here. We need to be fair to all parts of our town. We can't single out one part of town for a different set of rules. And I think that's going to be particularly true as the two new hotels open on the Hill, and we want them to be successful in addition to the success of our smaller businesses on the Hill. And I say that on the night that we honor our small businesses throughout town. And finally, I want to compliment the residential neighbors of the Hill. It would have been very easy for them to oppose 8590 and could have turned this into a very binary decision with the neighbors, the residential neighbors, pitted on one side and against the merchants. And while I know that not all the residents are happy with 8590, I compliment the University Hill Neighborhood Association for sitting down with the merchants, understanding some of their needs, and wanting the greater good of success of all members of our community, whether they're in the business world or residents. And we still have work to do on the Hill. There's no doubt about that. But I think this move towards parity is the right thing. And so for all those reasons, I'll be supporting 8590.
Bob, while you have the floor, are you interested in making a motion?
Does anybody else have comments? I want to give people a comment. I'd love to make it, since this will be my last motion, I'd love to make the motion when the time comes, but
we'll give comment opportunities right after the motion.
Okay, well, then I will, thank you for that opportunity, Aaron. I move the approval of Ordinance 8590, amending Title 9, Land Use Code, BRC 1981, to update the use table and use standards, finally, related to the walkable neighborhood centers, including changes to the standards for restaurants, brew pubs, taverns within the BMS, Business Main Street District, and University Hill General Improvement District, and setting forth lots of related details.
Can I see if Junie wants to do a simultaneous second with me? Since we're also getting our last moment here. On the count of three. 1, 2, 3. I second that motion.
City Clerk, are we allowed to have a dual second? So we allowed this one time?
Sure, why not?
Right. Would either of you like to speak to your second, the motion?
Bob said it very well. Nothing to add.
I ditto Bob.
I'll ditto Bob as well. Does anybody want to add additional comments? Tara?
I just want, is Pete Turner still in the room? Because I want to say I'm pretty excited to meet the owner of Legal Pete's right now. That's the truth. He's a celebrity to me. So thank you, Pete, for speaking. That was awesome. I am so excited about 8590, which I will never forget those numbers, by the way. I've been thinking about them so much for the past week. And I want to say that we are committed. I know that I'm committed in our next couple of years to do even more for the Hill and for the Hill Commercial District, especially in regards to safety and lighting. So I'm going to be there for you. I'm sure we all are.
Matt?
I appreciate that. It's worth, I think, reflecting on this a little bit, that this isn't going to change everything overnight. This just starts the clock. And so I think for the concern of, what this may do, it's been 10 years since the 2013 ordinance has slowly withered the Hill down to a stub. And it's going to take time to get it back. But this is an opportunity for us to reset the clock and start the ascension of the Hill appropriately. And I'm just excited that this council will get to sort of kick that ball, and hopefully, some of our business leaders on the Hill, like Mark and others, and certainly with Ted and his work in New Campsie, can help us take the wind behind the sails here and really move us forward with the additions of the hotel and stuff like that. And so I think this is long time coming, and just great that we're at this point. So thanks for all your patience, and certainly for everybody else on the Hill for taking it on the chin for so long, and here we are to move us forward. So looking forward to celebrating that and prosperity in front of us.
And I'll just call on myself, echo those comments. I just had dinner at Cafe Aeon and reminded me of how wonderful the Hill is, but also how much better it could be. And so hopefully this will be a good step in that direction. And I just want to really commend staff. There's been a huge amount of work over 5 years now plus and it's coming to a close, this 5-year cycle, but also the incredible amount of work that we threw at you over these last 2 years. And like Bob, some time ago, I thought, well, we probably won't make it through all of this, but in fact, we're getting through all of it, absolutely all of it. It's just extraordinary work on all of your parts. Here we are at the last meeting, and we're finishing out the work plan. So really deeply grateful for all of the incredibly hard and high quality work that the department has done. And this is a great step forward. We hear all the times from our business owners and restaurateurs about how challenging the regulatory environment can be in our town. So I appreciate you bringing these ideas forward and us getting this done. And also a shout out to the Use Table Subcommittee, our members did hours of grueling work to get us to this spot. So excited to take this step and move on for the betterment of the city. Any other comments before we go to a vote? Not seeing any. Emily, if we could, please.
All right. We'll start the roll call vote on tonight's public hearing with Councilmember Folkerts.
Yes.
Friend?
Yes.
Joseph?
Yes.
Councilmember Spear?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Wallach?
Aye.
Weiner?
Yes.
Yates?
Yes.
Councilmember Benjamin?
Enthusiastic, yes.
And Mayor Brockett.
Yes.
Ordinance 8590 is hereby adopted unanimously.
Right on. Okay. Thanks again for all your amazing work. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our public hearings, and our next going to our matters from the mayor and members of council. And while we're adjusting here, I'll just give a shout out to Mark Heinrichs in the room for all the sink burgers over the years.
100 years.
Right.
Good margaritas.
See you again.
I did. With 1/3 less alcohol.
Okay, so if we could go to our item 8A, please.
Absolutely. Next on our agenda, we have our matters from the mayor and members of council. And first, we have item 8A, and that is the Boulder Noblesse Sister City discussion.
Rachel, do you mind if I turn to you, since this was an agenda item that you originally requested?
Sure. So we got some emails from community members complaining that the Sister City project for Nablus was in violation of its commitments to the city when it formed as a sister city. And so I asked staff, is that something that we can just ask staff to look at? And I was told, no, that's something that council needs to take up. So I asked CAC to schedule time so we could discuss whether we, I think, care about whether we think the commitments have been violated, whether we care if they've been violated, and then what to do if they have been.
Thanks for that. Does anyone want to respond to that with a thought on how we might proceed with this question?
Just one more thing to add, that this is not, my request was not to look at the international conflict that's happening. This is not going into what's happening in the Middle East or condemning any cities in the Middle East. It's just talking about what's happening here in Boulder, but like on a Facebook page that's operated out of Boulder.
Yeah, and maybe I can just, thanks for that, Rachel, frame the discussion as purely kind of a process question of whether we want to give feedback to the Boulder Nablus Sister City Project nonprofit, and regardless of how people feel about the current situation in the Middle East. And what I might actually ask, Teresa, so there are specific agreements that organization agreed to upon the formation of the Sister City relationship, but we also, like one of the public comment speakers earlier mentioned, how come other sister cities don't have to abide by similar rules. But we actually do have general rules that all of our sister cities are required to abide by. Do I have that correct?
Yes, Mayor, I believe that that's right. I will say, however, that, there was a reference to 501c3s and the prohibition on political speech for 501c3s. That would be a state and federal matter, and we don't enforce state and federal tax provisions, and that's what those provisions revolve around. And so that actually would not be particularly applicable here. But the general rules would, and any particular understandings with respect to how a relationship might go, for example, the commitments made when the sister city of Nablus was approved, would also be applicable.
Okay, thanks. But I think I think our general guidelines include dealing with with cultural matters rather than political matters. Do I have that correct?
Yes, that's right. Specifically, in the resolution outlining our sister city participation, it says that each city relationship shall emphasize people-to-people exchanges and projects, especially those of a primarily humanitarian concern, which address human needs, environmental concerns, human rights, and the enrichment of people in the respective cities.
Very good. Thank you for that. Okay, Jeannie's got her hand up.
Thank you. That's exactly where I was heading, along the same line. Thank you very much, Mayor Brockett, along the same line concerning why are some sister cities allowed to make political statements while others are restricted. Whether I have that correctly or not, that's what at least one of our speakers mentioned to earlier, who was Aiden Reed. So I do get a sense, and I understand nonprofits have to follow taxable guideline that they're not allowed to, 501c3s are not allowed to make political statements. But my understanding as well, based on what you just said, is that there must be some type of an agreement between or sister cities in the city itself in order for them to become a sister city. Is that correct?
Well, I think they're all expected to abide by our guiding regulations for sister city relationships, which include the ones that Teresa just read.
Okay, so I feel like we're parsing forwards here. There is expectation if there are also agreements. You can expect things from me, but if there are written agreements and it appears based on the conversation that it's not very clear. So maybe let me just make my comment.
Okay, please.
That I hope moving forward, because I'm no longer going to be a member of this council, is that we have clear guidelines and clear rules for all sister cities, right? Because ultimately, I think as a community or as a council who deal with sister cities or community members, right, is that we want people to feel welcome, and that part of inclusive and equitable way of being in the world is that we engage in a manner that make people feel that they're on the same level. So that means having clear guideline for all sister cities that says, hey, you're not allowed to partake or participate in political speech. And that should be a guideline that is required by the city, as opposed to, hey, your 501c3 already determined that you're not allowed to participate in these type of speeches. So again, for me, we have community members reaching out to us and asking us to make decisions or to offer guidance to our sister cities, and having clear guideline would be really helpful. Thank you.
That's a great point, Jeannie. Thanks. I think I had Nicole and then Tara.
Yeah, I just had a question, which is, has anybody talked to the Boulder Nablus Sister City Project people?
Yep.
Okay, and I'm just because I guess what I'm wondering is, did anybody let them know that this was something that was causing a little bit of concern, and how, what happened there?
And so it sounds like Tara and Bob have both spoken. Do you all want to speak to your conversations with them?
Thanks for that, Nicole. Yeah, I'll let Tara speak for her conversation. Yes, I did give the, when this came up via Rachel and CAC put this on the calendar, I did reach out to because I am the liaison to, each council member is a liaison to at least one sister city. I am the liaison to Nablus, and so I did reach out to the board chair for Nablus and alert her to the fact that we were going to have this discussion tonight. And she was conferring with her colleagues on the board. As a matter of fact, they're literally having a board meeting as we speak about removing some of the language which we heard from some of our speakers earlier tonight from some of their postings. I don't want to make that commitment on their behalf, and she was still speaking with some of her board colleagues, but at least with respect to the board chair, there was an interest in to remove the offending language, and as the liaison to the Sister City project, if it is the will of council that I have a follow-up conversation after tonight's discussion, I'd be happy to do that and report back to council on whether the offending language is going to be removed, or if there is a resistance to that, in which case council may want to have a further discussion.
Tara, did you want to talk about your conversation?
No, actually what I was going to say was, for those of you that don't know, I'm the president of the Israeli Sister City. And why I started the Sister City was because of the Sister City International's goal. Its mission is to promote peace through mutual respect, understanding, and cooperation, one individual, one community at a time. So that is the mission of, should be the mission of all sister cities. That's the purpose of a sister city. It's not supposed to be political. It is really, you're supposed to be there for them, they're supposed to be there for you. I take them on a hike, we go to Pearl Street, etc. So I just wanted to make that clear. And I do agree that the other thing I want to say is the BNSCP commitments that was signed by ESRIA is really a good document that any sister city would agree with, because it has all good things to it. There are some favorites of mine. I won't bother. Maybe I'll read them later, my favorites, but I'm not going to read them now. So I just wanted, I did have a great conversation with Brenda today, and but it was felt like a long time ago, so now I can't even remember it. Is that okay? All right.
But I think both of you heard some openness to folks there at looking at the agreements and adjusting posts and communication based on that. Okay, that's great to hear. Lauren?
Thank you, Erin. I think, let's see. Having read both of these commitments, my concerns sort of go farther than just, you know, is Nobilis upholding this commitment or not? But I think it is really problematic that the agreements between our sister cities are so different, right? Like our Palestinian sister city and our Israeli sister city agreements are significantly different. And I think that that's in and of itself is something that, to me, that this brought to light for me, and is something that I would like to see us address. I've spoken to some of you about it, and there's been sort of a suggestion that maybe we should make this, have other sister cities agree to not making political speech as well. But I really don't think that we should think really hard about whether, as a council body, we want to be making decisions about whether or not any particular speech is based in fact or is political speech. I think that that is an area that I certainly don't want to be weighing into regularly, and I think that it's likely to come up. This will not be the last time, I imagine, that an issue like this comes up, particularly if we expand those rules. So I would ask us to, I mean, I think reaching out to the sisters, to Nobilis makes sense, or to the sister city organization, and to speak to them about what's been posted. But I wouldn't want to see us wade too heavily into trying to restrict their speech. I think it plays into, like, I know that we're trying to keep this conversation focused, but that couldn't do anything but wade into sort of a larger discussion. And I think that as we try to I mean, our sister cities are supposed to be sort of about this exchange of ideas. And I think that if we limit all political speech, that we curtail their ability to do that. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Lauren. Yeah, Mark and then Matt, I got thoughts of my own as well.
First, I think it's important to remember the context in which all of this arose. In 2013, I believe the first application by Nablus was rejected, and in 2016 it was accepted because they offered these commitments to us. So this is not as much a free speech issue, it's an issue of keeping the commitments that they've freely made. I think Junie raises a good point. Maybe we should have uniform commitments for all sister cities. But I think that the lesson has to be any sister city is as free as they want to exercise their rights to political speech. And they are free to be our sister city, but not at the same time. You get to choose one of those or the other. And that's what was done here with these commitments. And I regard this simply as, are you going to uphold the commitments that you made to us or not? And in the context of being our sister city, that is an obligation that you freely undertook. And it is not the appropriate thing to do to say, well, that doesn't suit us anymore, so we don't want to do that. You can do that, but it's not consistent with being our sister city and the terms on which we admitted Nablus as a sister city. But Junie does have a good point. We should probably look at this in the next council and see if there's a uniform set of standards that we want to impose on all sister cities.
Thanks for that, Mark. If I may maybe offer a path forward here, because I'm hearing general interest in taking Bob up on his offer as the liaison with the Nablus sister city to discuss with the board kind of because those commitments were agreed to, it's been 7 years now, right? So I'm not sure that everyone who's currently working there is deeply familiar with them. So if you're willing to reach out to them and talk that over with them and send that feedback, it sounds like potentially council would support that. But I'm also hearing interest, which I agree with, in establishing some clear standards for our sister cities in general about what the guidelines are in terms of what is the purview and what kinds of things would sister city nonprofit be addressing and not be addressing. So I wonder if we could say to staff, can we put a note to come back to this to maybe put something together that we might send out to our sister city organizations sometime before too long, not right away probably.
And just building on Aaron's final comment there to staff about uniform standards, Sister Cities International, which is based in Washington, does have a set of standards that it suggests that cities that do adopt sister cities undertake, and it does speak to a political commentary. As a matter of fact, I seem to recall, Aaron, that when we were considering the Nablus sister city sanction back in 2016, there was a young man who flew out from Washington from Sister Cities International who talked to us about this very point. And I think that they would be a very good resource to staff if they want to reach out to Sister Cities International and talk about standards that they recommend that cities adopt around, because this is not the first time this has happened, either in Boulder or in other cities, and it is a tough issue. And I think Junie makes a great point about having parity and uniformity across all of our sister city relationships, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel since Sister Cities International has already done a lot of that work for us.
And they actually have a full-time employee in Denver who's come up here once or twice before. I'm forgetting her name, but she's a lovely woman who I'm sure would be happy to help us with that.
We'd be happy to look into that, and depending on what we find, we'd be happy to come back to council and share for your approval.
Very good. Is this acceptable to folks, Matt and Rachel? You had your hands up.
I still have comments that I
Yes.
was going to
Yeah,
share,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I'll
Yeah,
go
go
do
ahead.
it. I like Junie's idea of parity as well, and I will note, like, as I recall, the decision to create the sister city relationship was fraught, and I think that we did make a commitment to the community that we would monitor it. The speech, on Facebook pages and newsletters and stuff, and we obviously didn't do that. And so that's a failing on this council's part, in my opinion, not any individual council member, but, that I think we breached a commitment as well. So, I don't think that should happen again. So I when I first reached out to Teresa and Nuri, I was like, I don't think any of us really know much about sister cities or what we're doing here. And so I think that when I started in 2019, we were getting ready to have a dinner and sort of learn about them, and then COVID happened, and I just think whatever was in place prior to 2019 never got up to speed during my 4 years. And so I think there needs to be some sort of staff attachment and point person for sister cities, because this is obviously something that I think is not ideal for us to receive complaints from community members. We ought to be having conversations when a staff member or somebody is seeing that and taking it out of confusion in community members' hands. And I think that to Lauren's point, if we don't like the commitments, I don't think we can just disregard them, because there was so much community heated discussion there that I think we would have to go back and engage again. And that would be I imagine, even more laden discussion at this point than it was in 2016. So that's up to you all, but just flagging, I don't think we can just decide not to care about the agreements that we as a body agreed to, because I think that, again, that's a commitment that we make to the community as well. Good luck, everyone.
Thanks, Rachel. Matt?
Please stop reminding us that it's up to us.
So I have a question for Teresa that sort of will maybe frame my comments. If I recall, I think in the council procedures that this body is generally prohibited from weighing in on international politics and or diplomacy related issues, if I recall. I just remember that from my council training, that there's sort of a limit to, there's a boundary to which this body weighs into things, and that was deliberate and intentionally so.
That is somewhat accurate. It is a prohibition on wading into those waters without appropriate staff time and information. And so arguably with the sister cities, there has been information and time put into it, and the general relationship with council would be an appropriate topic. I would agree with you that any international matter that is of an emerging nature, we would not yet have had direction to study or the opportunity or time to do that.
True, but our relationship with these sister cities weren't necessarily, as geopolitics changes, necessarily governed by and or informed by the situations that we are in right now, since some of these existed predating the current situation. So what I'm getting at is, by extension, for us as a city, citing we aren't weighing in on those geopolitical stuff, isn't that by extension also a way in which we want to carry forth those sister city relationships so that we aren't put in that position to be sort of forced to weigh in on that international diplomacy and geopolitics stuff? Because I worry otherwise we're sort of reverse flowing that back in to where here we are, and we're sort of skirting around the issue, but to focus on the issue with our sister cities. So I'm just trying to frame our own rules by extension with our sister cities, and how that actually informs us of how we maybe move forward in this situation, if that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I think when you pair that with the purpose of the sister city relationship at all, it would counsel that geopolitical interests and political interests are not a part of the are not a part of what we're dealing with when we're talking about a sister city.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. So I'll also sort of come to Aaron's recommendation. I appreciate that Bob's already reached out and that there's an opportunity to follow up. I do think that just given what we've heard from community and the sensitivity of the issue, that beyond, and also we're going to be saying goodbye to Bob here pretty soon, and then who carries that mantle thereafter, and so not knowing what the time is or when there's resolution to this, if there is. I'm wondering that in this instance, just because of the nature of Bob being the representative and him timing off, does it make sense for the city to have a letter so that there's some formality to it? Only, not that we're severing or doing anything, but just of the specific rules of what we're sort of, hey, here's the rules, here's a reminder, we'd like for this stuff to be reconciled, so that it's in record, but more importantly, it allows a baseline for whoever does take over for Bob in that representation to kind of have a very consistent platform to continue that conversation should it continue on into 2024.
If that's the will of council, we can certainly do that. I would also say that these meeting minutes would serve as a record that would be sufficient and appropriate. So either is acceptable, and it's just whatever council would desire.
Okay, I appreciate that nuance.
And I'll just note real quick, I mean, the wordsmithing a letter could be a little
I
complicated.
wasn't
so maybe
looking for us. I was going to more defer to Teresa, since this is a binding document, and let that be the and her team a more appropriate way if there was a letter, not having us wordsmith, because I think that would be much more appropriate.
I understand that desire, and I appreciate the confidence. I don't see this as a legal matter, actually. I see this instead as a set of commitments about how the relationship would be governed. Certainly legal would be happy to help. We're very good at drafting things and great at letters. But I just would note that I don't see it as particularly a legal matter, and sometimes when the lawyers are writing, it makes people nervous. I don't know why.
Nicole?
So I think one of the things that makes me just a little bit nervous about this is that, we've been having conversation kind of about the Boulder Nebula Sister City program without kind of hearing back from them. And since they're discussing it tonight, I think what I would prefer, I would appreciate, Bob, you're kind of reaching out and hearing what they have to say, but just having that conversation first. And I don't know, Bob, if you could sort of report back maybe on hotline would be appropriate. And then, we can kind of go from there. Because, at this point, I think they've, based on an email we got earlier today, they just kind of realized that this was something that was hurting people in the community. And I don't get the sense that most people in the community are out to hurt each other. This is just a really challenging topic where we have a lot of people are hurting in the community, and I think it's just a sensitive one. But I think one of the beautiful things about the Sister City project is that it really encourages communication, especially when things are hard, especially when we're hurting. And I think those are ideals that we should strive for. And as we're thinking about parity in the Sister City agreements, I think maybe we could just ask that if something is happening with one of the Sister City programs, to reach out to the liaison. Maybe, in the interim, we can, with any of those sister cities, we can just, as council, acknowledge that liaison will go and have a conversation, and we can bring it back if needed. But I think generally with folks in our community, having that conversation is a good starting point. So thank you, Bob, for being willing to do that and letting us know. And I expect that will be a very fruitful conversation.
Can I colloquy on that a little? Only in the sense of, what are we asking Bob to communicate? Are we just trusting Bob to have that conversation on his own? Or are we saying, hey, as a body, we would like Bob to ask them to remove that stuff or whatever? I'm just trying to understand what's the charge here since we're having this conversation.
Yeah, Bob, as my colleague, I trust you to go and have a conversation, but really I think it's just about understanding, sharing information, making sure that everybody is on the same page, and then hearing, how they respond. It may be that, they're saying, oh my gosh, we didn't realize, we didn't know, we're going to change things. I heard either you or Tara say that they were talking about changing or removing some of the language. So I think until we know what the response is, it's really just a conversation.
Yeah, I'm not going to communicate anything on behalf of council. They're watching right now. They're gathered in somebody's home around a kitchen table with the laptop on and watching us right now. So they're listening right now to what we're talking about. And so what I'll simply do is talk to them tomorrow and hear what they as a board decided to do, and I'll report that dutifully back to council. And it'll either be adequate to council or it won't be. And if it's not, then you can take it up further.
Yeah. And just to be clear, this is an organization that's working on a lot of great projects. I mean, the current one is fundraising for to purchase an ambulance for a refugee camp, right? So are we comfortable then with sending Bob to have that conversation, then report back? Are people good with that? Very good. And then we're also carrying the message to Nuria to look at how we can have common standards, right, for our sister city relationships, and so something that we can come back to before too long.
Testing, testing. Hello, hello. Testing 1, 2, 3.
We can hear you, Anthem.
Thanks, Ryan.
Folks who are watching from home, we're just on a recess here because the technology cut out, and we're just waiting for a couple council members to come back. I hear the technology is back. We will we will end our recess and come back in from the playground once we have everybody at the dais again. Give us a moment. Okay, so I'm bring our recess to a close, and we'll recommence the meeting. Apologies, everyone, for the technical difficulties coming back in. And I understand that the feed cut out before we were finished with the discussion of the Nablus sister city conversation. So if folks don't mind, I'll just mention that the outcome, just to recap, the outcome of that conversation was to ask Bob is our Nablus Sister City liaison to speak with the board members of the Nablus Sister City project about the need to look at the commitments and make sure that they are being complied with. And we've heard preliminary information that that is something that they're willing to do. So hopefully that'll be a productive discussion. And so you'll report back to us, Bob, I think via hotline, about the results of those discussions. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think what's very important to me is that the commitments are upheld, because if we go back to 2016, that's what we all decided to do, and I think it's important for us to keep that.
Very good. Thank you for that. And the other thing is that we are going to be clear about the expectations for all of our sister cities about sticking to cross-cultural and humanitarian items. Okay, so that was what we talked about there. We are now moving back into, why don't we reread into the record, 8B.
Of course. So we have item 8B, and that is the outgoing council member declarations.
So Mark, do you want to go up and do it in? We don't have much of an audience out here, but let's make it a little more, give it a little more oomph. You all are individually, each of you, very important. It's just the number of people out there isn't very large.
As I was saying before I was so rudely interrupted, it is my great privilege and honor to read this declaration from my friend Bob Yates. And it's a declaration honoring Bob Yates' service on the Boulder City Council, dated November 16, 2023. Bob Yates was elected to his first of 2 four-year terms on the Boulder City Council in 2015. His service has consistently focused on increasing access to affordable housing, economic vitality, and ensuring government accountability and transparency. He was selected by his peers to serve as Mayor Pro Tem from November 2019 to November 2020. Bob, his wife Katie, and their 2 sons moved to Boulder in 2001. When he retired in 2011, Bob immersed himself in service to Boulder, volunteering with the city and more than a dozen civic and nonprofit organizations, including serving as a member of the city's Capital Investment Strategy Stakeholder Committee, chair of the city's Parks and Recreation Advisory Board, treasurer of the Colorado Chautauqua Association, and secretary of the Dairy Arts Center. One of Bob's proudest accomplishments was serving for 4 years as president of the Boulder History Museum, leading the 75-year-old organization in its transition to the Museum of Boulder, with the construction of a new museum downtown showcasing Boulder's history of innovation. While a member of City Council, Bob served on many committees, including financial strategy, community engagement, charter, and retreat planning. He was one of the city's representatives to the National League of Cities and was the council liaison to the Boulder Convention and Visitors Bureau and multiple sister city committees. In parallel with his service on the City Council, Bob continues to be active in civic and nonprofit organizations, including serving as chairman of the board of nonprofit Downtown Boulder Community Initiatives, which presents dozens of events and programs in downtown Boulder with an emphasis on inclusivity. In 2019, Bob and his wife Katie launched Rainbows Over Pearl, an initiative to ensure that LGBTQ people feel welcome downtown. This initiative has grown into an annual event that now includes the whole city. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, recognize, honor, and appreciate the service on council and the significant contributions made to the city and community by Bob Yates.
All right, Rachel, we're up next. Okay, here we go. This is tough. Can't believe you're leaving. This is a declaration honoring my good friend, Rachel Friend's service on the Boulder City Council on November 16, 2023. So Rachel Friend was elected to the Boulder City Council in 2019. Throughout her 4 years on council, Rachel has used her voice to amplify issues ranging from flood mitigation to social justice to pandemic recovery. She was selected by her peers to serve as mayor pro tem from November 2021 to 22. Rachel began building her legacy of local action before ever running for city council as an advocate for improved flood mitigation solutions for CU South and as a volunteer for Colorado Moms Demand Action, a group dedicated to ending gun violence. I can vouch for this. It was the calls I used to get from Rachel before she was on council on these issues. During her time on city council, Rachel helped foster an environment supporting physical and emotional safety for community members, staff, and council, as well as enhancing government processes for people of all ages, identities, lived experiences, and political perspectives. She was instrumental in the passage of the city's passage of 6 gun violence prevention measures in 2022. Rachel is also a champion for advancing racial equity. She drove the adoption of Council Resolution 1275, which committed city council members to participate in the city's racial equity trainings and workshops, along with strengthening the city's commitment to promote racial equity in city relationships, programs, services, and policies. In addition, as a member of the city's Racial Equity Guiding Coalition, she provided valuable input leading to successful adoption of the city's first racial equity plan. Rachel also provided valuable guidance and expertise to develop ideas and innovations for the Reimagined Policing Plan, along with directly assisting city staff to connect with community partners and achieve greater public input for the Reimagined Policing Plan. Her support both for better policing and for the existing members of the Boulder Police Department was exemplary, particularly through her personal support and encouragement following the tragedy at King Soopers in 2021. While her council term comes to an end, the Boulder community will continue to benefit from her contributions long into the future. So we, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, recognize, honor, and appreciate the contributions to the city by outgoing council member Rachel Friend. Nicole, do you want to come up and do Ginny's? You can do it from there? Okay, very good. Ginny, I wish you were here, but.
Me too.
I know, Junie, I'm just going to stay sitting since my vaccines I had this morning are starting to kick in, and you're sitting too. I just want to take a moment of personal privilege and say, Councilmember Joseph, first you were my colleague, then you were my mentor, and now I am so honored to call you my friend. Thank you for being a source of support and learning and laughter. I'm really going to miss your presence here, but I'm glad we'll still get to work together in your role as our House District Representative. So now I will begin the official declaration. Junie Joseph was elected to the Boulder City Council in 2019. Throughout her 4 years on council, Junie has used her voice to amplify issues ranging from housing access to city financial strategy. She was selected by her peers to serve as Mayor Pro Tem from November 2020 to 2021. Councilmember Joseph was born in Port-au-Prince, Haiti, and moved to the United States at the age of 14 years old. After spending her early career as an international human rights champion, she became a resident of Boulder to pursue her Juris Doctor at the University of Colorado Law School and ran for City Council as a student. As a member of Boulder City Council, Councilmember Joseph has consistently advocated for budget transparency, occupancy reform, and equity. She advocated for bringing OpenGov to the city to make the city's $500 million budget more accessible to community members. And as the city's liaison to the Mile High Flood District, she advocated for flood mitigation funding. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she helped the city get a grant from the National League of Cities to do bus ads and outreach to the Latino community. And when the bilingual emergency alert system was at risk of elimination, she was a strong advocate for keeping it in place. As a member of the Financial Strategy Committee, Councilmember Joseph advocated for city funding to support CU Law's Immigration Clinic, which assists non-citizens in navigating the immigration legal system. Further, as a member of the Racial Equity Guiding Coalition, she advocated for a collaborative CU Boulder City of Boulder internship program in order to retain young people in Boulder and to create a workforce pipeline. She also was the first member of Boulder City Council to propose bringing an alternative responder program to the city, which Boulder is now implementing. Boulder City Council to be, something is missing here. All right, let me try to figure out what it's supposed to say. Councilmember Joseph was the first member of Boulder City Council to be appointed to chair the Colorado Municipal League's Policy Committee, which develops the league's legislative program. As a member of the National League of Cities Human Development Committee and the Real Council, she has influenced national policy positions and been a steadfast advocate for social and economic policies that impact people in Boulder and all across the state. While her service to City Council comes to an end, Councilmember Joseph's political career remains strong. Junie Joseph will continue to serve the people of Boulder in the Colorado State Legislature as the representative of District 10. We, the City Council of the City of Boulder, Colorado, recognize, honor, and appreciate the contributions to the city by outgoing Councilmember Junie Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Wow, that was very powerful. We're going to miss you all. So now it's a chance for 8C to, I'll let Emily get us going there.
Thank you so much. Yes, we'll move along to item 8C, and that is the outgoing council member recommended improvements.
So Rachel, Junie, Bob, this is your chance if you want to share some insights from your many years of service to the city and talk about all the things we do a terrible job at and what we could do better.
Ready to take notes?
I vote Bob goes first, and then like Junie and I can clean up because he's got twice the length of time, right? And add anything that, no? Okay. Junie, you're up then.
You know what? I feel like the two of you planned this. Sure, I'll go first. I want to start by saying it has been a real pleasure serving on Boulder City Council. I want to thank Maria for all the work she has done, and I also want to thank City Attorney Teresa Tate, two people who I consider powerhouses. I'm deeply honored to have been part of their hiring process. Thank you is an incomplete word, but thank you anyway. So with all these nice words I have just expressed, I just want to give some high-level feedback based on what I hear from the community. Some community members wish council was better at articulating their homelessness strategies and plan to the rest of the community. Also, some felt that the city's climate plan and strategies are not in plain English, so it's too academic. Therefore, I would appreciate if the city would express its climate strategies in ordinary plain English that is accessible to all as part of the city's equity plan. Further, the city needs to do a better job at announcing boards and commission and give enough time for community members to apply. I have heard that the timeline for board and commission is not inclusive for all community members, especially the working class. Once again, thank you so much to all city staff, to all my council members. It has been an honor serving with this council, and I look forward to our continued partnership through my role as a state representative. And some of you I've really gotten to know as real friends, and I hope to keep all of you as friends as well. And I look forward to this, alternative, different way of engaging each other, but nonetheless, we are community members, which is actually the most important part of what it means to be in this community together. So thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Junie. We've benefited enormously from your wisdom over the years, and look forward to continuing to work together in your other capacity during the years to come.
Junie, if we had planned that, it couldn't have gone better. So, I feel like maybe, you subliminally planted that idea. Well done. I also want to say it's been an honor to serve, and much as I have made light of, my desire to come to a very speedy conclusion here, I'm always mindful that it is a privilege and an honor to be entrusted by the community to do the work we do. And so I think the community and staff for supporting our work and being so outstanding, and all of my colleagues who are going to, especially those of you who are going to continue to do the good work, thank you. And I was thinking on the way over, how would I describe these 4 years? And maybe it's because it's 4 years, but I was thinking it is a little like high school. You come in your freshman year, you're all lit up and enthusiastic, and everything's wow. And then you really get into a very studious learning mode, maybe end of freshman year through, I'm going to go with beginning of senior year. And then by the end, you're wearing pajamas, don't want to open the calculus book. It is hard, by this exact moment in high school. So I appreciate you all putting up with my immense senioritis, and that does not diminish how much I am grateful for the opportunity. I don't have a ton for the recommendations. I did want to just flag a couple of policy things that I hope will move forward. One is on the core arterial network, which we just got an update from staff just for oncoming council members and maybe staff who weren't here for that. It was, the goal was protected bike lanes and to be on these streets that we're gonna we picked because that's where a sizable number of accidents were happening. So I just wanted to reiterate, as someone who is heavily involved with that is what the intent was. Also want to flag that it took a long time to get approval for a safe outdoor space sanctioned campground. I do hope that that people will decide to give that a try, because I really think it might help people who are suffering outside, and could be a big deal for the city and could work really well. So those are the policy ones. Just generally speaking, I think it's helpful when we don't reinvent wheels, and you all will have so much in the next council work to do that opening up cans of worms, we discussed a little bit earlier tonight, it is time intensive to do work that's already been done. So we'll just, having watched a lot of the work or participated in it, it's just something to bear in mind, that there are always going to be trade-offs if you go back on things that are kind of at a good enough status, then, instead of improving from where they are, it can take a lot of time. A couple things that maybe just didn't occur. I think we had agreed at one point to ditch hotline and come up with something that was going to replace that. So we'll flag that. I think that is very outmoded form of communication with community members. Nobody, in Gen Z's checking their emails to find out what city council's doing. So we sometimes abuse hotline, and in that I think it's got like very minuscule, allowed uses, and I think all of us have been guilty of like going outside of that. So just maybe revisit that, I don't know, January 2021 maybe, or 2022. I think it was 2021. Might have been 2020 discussion on like we're going to phase out hotline, and I think we were going to maybe do like a council members corner, like if you wanted to explain why you voted a certain way, then that was going to be on the city's website, something like that. So just a final request to put a fork in the hotline. I think it's good to, we also talked about moving the retreat out. I think that staff's already going to do that, but it is hard as a new incoming council member to understand how critical that retreat is and formative, and it's going to, bite you in the rear end for 2 years if you go in like I did my first year and ask for 70,000 things and you get 0. Like, you just help people to understand what the retreat is, and it's great if everybody gets some things that they care about on the work plan, and that is there are common ground things that hopefully everybody has something that they are passionate about in the 2 years that you are doing this joy-filled work for any work plan tenure. And just that I think that process matters a lot. The charter matters, the work rules matter, our words to the community need to matter. So just a gentle lift up of I think that we need to operate with integrity, and if we do want to go back and change things or relitigate any number of things that councils a year, 5, 10 years ago did, it needs to be transparent and involving the people who participated the first time. With that, it's been a joy. Thank you all.
Thanks so much, Rachel. We'll miss your expertise and passion for making the world a better place, but don't be a stranger.
Those who know me know that I like, at the very beginning of each council meeting, I like to predict what time we're going to end at. And this evening over dinner, I predicted we end at 8:45, so I've got 6 minutes to kill here.
What do you mean? It's 9:39.
That clock is wrong.
That clock is wrong for 6 months of the year.
It's 8:39, and I'm going to make this 8:45 one way or the other.
It's fixed like a month before daylight savings.
I'm not going to offer any recommendations right now. Nicole and I have had some good conversations about some process recommendations. So, and we will have some more conversations before the retreat. And so I'll leave it to Nicole to carry forward some joint suggestions from the two of us around those. So I would take my remaining 6.5 minutes to talk a little bit about just more of a retrospective of my 8 years on council. Aaron and I were first elected to City Council in November 2015. And our very first vote after being sworn in and electing Suzanne Jones as our mayor was to approve the city's first cultural master plan, laying out a decade-long path to significantly increasing funding for arts and culture in our community. Next year, Council will update that plan as it approaches its 10-year anniversary. Aaron will recall that in our early months on Council, we were embroiled in a community debate over the pros and cons of liberalizing Boulder's laws on co-ops. Like so many other policy considerations that we participated in during those 8 years on Council, the co-op discussion, we tried to balance the interests of those seeking more opportunities for affordable housing against the character of our community that had developed over the decades. Often the fears and prognostications on both sides of the community debate that we were not going far enough or that we were going too far proved wrong. While we were in fact changing our town, we were not destroying it. During the late teens, before the 2020 pandemic, this tension in our community was reflected in other policy considerations by City Council. Some of the community wanted us to do more to improve our little world, and others wanted us to slow down and reflect before acting. In addition to the co-op debate during the 2016-2019 period, we approved commercial linkage fees for new commercial buildings that would pay for affordable housing. We updated our comprehensive plan. We voted on cannabis regulation, flood mitigation, and prairie dog removal. We held hearings on residential developments on North Broadway, at 30th and Pearl, at Hogan Pancoast, on the Hill, and at the former Boulder Community Hospital site. We approved a high-end senior living facility on Mapleton and a less fancy place for homeless youth on Pine. We voted on fracking, height limits, broadband, e-bikes, vaping, gun violence prevention, hate crimes, and racial equity. We created a middle-income down payment assistance program. We approved a guaranteed income program. We launched an eviction prevention program. We made it easier for homeowners to host accessory dwelling units. We added sister cities in Palestine, Israel, and Nepal. We struggled with homelessness. We still do. Perhaps the dominant topic during those pre-pandemic years was municipalization, that decade-long Boulder civil war about whether the city would take over the Xcel Energy electric distribution network in the name of more aggressive climate action, or whether we would cajole Xcel into getting greener in other ways. Going back to 2010, our community was split down the middle on the right approach, with exactly half voting in a series of elections to pursue municipalization and the other half firmly opposed. It finally took COVID, along with some legal and financial setbacks, to break the logjam on municipalization, allowing for a negotiated settlement in the summer of 2020, which the voters approved that fall. The COVID pandemic hit us without warning, and it hit us hard. It's as if someone flipped a switch. There was the normal world, and then, suddenly, we entered the COVID world, a whole new planet. Hotels and restaurants were shuttered. Planes stopped flying. Hospitals filled up. Our little city government, so tremendously dependent on sales tax, virtually came to a standstill. Rec centers and libraries closed, and hundreds of city employees were furloughed. Only the fire and police departments carried on, albeit with their own health and safety constraints. Like everyone else, City Council moved to virtual meetings. Through 2020 and 2021, city governments proceeded down the parallel paths of dealing with the health and financial crisis while also trying to maintain some semblance of normality, hoping that someday the pandemic would be over. When not slashing budgets in municipal services, the City Council got a surprising amount of work done over Zoom. In addition to settling the municipalization fight, during the pandemic we dealt with neighborhood speed mitigation, created a police oversight panel, expanded the camping ban, launched a downtown ambassador program, and redeveloped Diagonal Plaza. We appointed Sam Weaver and then Aaron Brockett as our mayors to lead us and represent us. We hired a new police chief. We hired a new city attorney. We hired a new city manager. And we hired about 14 planning directors. I think we finally found a good one.
Chris enjoyed that one.
Chris was one of them. With the help of the voters, we approved the CU South annexation. We shifted to even-year elections. We approved taxes. We created a new library district, and we set up direct election of our mayor. I agreed with some of those choices and not others. But the important thing was that our voters made the final decisions. And of course, there was the horrific King Super shooting on March 22, 2021, in which 10 of our friends and neighbors were lost. That was followed a few months later by a horrific fire in our neighboring towns, where more than 1,000 homes were destroyed. With the end of the pandemic, these last 2 years have seen a return to our long-standing community discussions over what we want our town to be. There is a natural tension between representation and leadership. As we listen, then lead, we consider policies that every community struggles with. How do we ensure affordability while maintaining existing community character? How do we protect neighborhoods at risk from floods and fires while not damaging nearby neighborhoods? To which homeless people do we owe a duty of assistance? What more can we do to prevent gun violence without crossing legal lines? Should we prioritize cars or bikes? How do we do our part to combat climate change? What is the right role for police in our community? Should we build a broadband network? Should we keep our airport? Should Colorado cities cede some land use control to the state in the name of increased housing affordability? What should our minimum wage be, and when should we change it? Has XL done enough to reduce carbon emissions, or should we resume municipalization? Are we happy with the mix of the city's revenues between sales taxes and property taxes? Are we applying the right priorities as we budget those revenues for municipal services? Where will the next big housing development go, or should there even be one? As we look forward, these questions will be discussed and debated over and over. None of us has all the answers. Opinions will differ. Visions will diverge. Priorities will shift. This is healthy. This is democracy. This is what community is all about. Diverse people with diverse views conversing about how they can live together. I have been privileged to have been one of the facilitators of these community discussions during 350 city council meetings over the last 8 years. I will miss it. I will miss you. But the city is in good hands under your leadership, and I'm not going anywhere. As I discover my next opportunities to serve this community, I will be only a phone call away. Call me anytime.
That was great, Bob. We'll miss your hard work and creativity and passion for the job and institutional knowledge, but you won't be far. Junie, yes.
I have part two.
Okay.
I have part two.
No. Did you want to read a poem? No.
No, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you is enough, thanks.
Okay. Well, and with that, any final thoughts before we bring our last council meeting of this term to an end?
I want to say, Bob Yates, that was lovely. Yeah. You're also like that kid in high school who, like, the bell rang. you held us over by 5 minutes.
All right, and with that, I'll gavel our last council business meeting of the term to a close at 8:46 p.m. Thanks, everyone, for all your service. Oh.